Hello and welcome to the Park Podcast, the Myers Park SGA's podcast series. My name is Kate Bundin and I'm a senior representative here at Myers Park. On today's episode, in celebration of Women's History Month, which is the month of March, we wanted to highlight some positive female role models that mean a lot to us and talk about what these women have done to impact our society and provoke change. I did a lot of research on some of my favorite female bands and female-fronted bands. Some of these are Heart, Hole, Dolly Parton, Ella Fitzgerald, Patti Smith, Amy Winehouse, Janis Joplin, and TLC. Something interesting is that Chili from TLC worked to spread awareness of HIV through clothing, and also TLC's hit Waterfalls is about HIV and the dangers of AIDS. Also Destiny's Child, Fleetwood Mac, Aretha Franklin, Madonna, who pushed boundaries with controversy, Sonic Youth with Kim Gordon and her messages fighting consumerism and body image and media misogyny. And it's just really interesting to me how musical artists can use their words, like female-fronted bands can spread awareness of important issues and use music as power.
I did some research and, a little bit more on like the older side, but you have people like Rosa Parks and Amelia Earhart, and then, people like Princess Diana, who did a lot of humanitarian work towards AIDS victims with like a lot of charities and stuff. And you just have people that push the boundaries for what was like acceptable back then, what was the social norms. So it's just really cool to look back and see what they did, especially in the time that they lived in.
Yeah, it's really cool to see like people fighting the societal norms of like their time and wherever they're from. And one of the people that I really noticed was like Greta Thunberg, because she's a climate change activist and she's really, really young and she's doing amazing things, raising awareness and actually creating change for climate change issues around the world. And it's just really cool to see someone that young have that much influence over so many people.
She was actually just on the morning announcements last week on a Feature Friday. So that was pretty cool to see, to kind of get a visual about, everything that she's about and everything that she stands for. But I found a couple people to highlight. There were a couple women who inspire me in my life, one of which is Selena. Selena was a famous singer, songwriter, and fashion designer from the 1980s, 1990s. And she was Latin American, and so her ethnicity kind of played a part in her rise to stardom. She kind of blew up in the Latin America culture and through that music, and she became one of the most influential female artists of the 20th century. And she kind of changed the landscape of that genre of music for forever. And unfortunately, she passed away when she was very young. I think she was in her 20s. She was actually murdered, which is very sad. But her posthumous album topped the Billboard 200 chart. So even after her death, she still had a lot of success and had a lot of fans supporting her. So she was definitely a very influential female artist. If y'all are looking for a song, Dreaming of You by Selena is a banger. So just maybe give that a listen. And thank you, Selena.
Yeah. Off of that, I am a big fan of Shakira, actually. Like, I love Shakira. One of her best albums, in my opinion, is Pies Descalzos. It's so good, so I recommend that. But she's Colombian, but she sings in Spanglish sometimes, so it's kind of represents, like, the fusion between her own roots and, like just English that she's, like, because she has such a big English audience, so I think it's really cool to see people or musical artists fuse their different cultures and stuff like that.
Yeah. Somebody I like a lot is like Beyonce. She's won 22 Grammy Awards, and she's just like somebody who I've always listened to since I was a kid, hearing her on the radio and stuff. And I think it's just awesome how she uses her voice to talk about stuff and, speak about current issues and use her voice as such a powerful and influential musician.
Yeah, to segue a little bit away, I agree with all the artists and musicians. But in class last week, in my civics class, we were talking about the Supreme Court and the justice system, and Sandra Day O'Connor stood out to me as being an influential woman of her time because she was the first woman associate justice of the Supreme Court here in the United States. And so that was really influential to hear her name and as a woman of her time to represent herself in that way. And then also what William said about Diana, that sparked something that recently just happened in the last few days, the interview with Meghan Markle, and how a lot of people were talking about how that seemed like it related to Diana, and everyone was like, oh, the new Diana, Meghan, and how her interview with Oprah and Harry talking about racism. I think that was something for this time in history was really important and amazing to watch if you get a chance.
Yeah, that's really cool, Anne Gray. I feel like everyone's mentioning a lot of really powerful and impactful women, which is going to be, I guess I'm going to steer away from that with this next person I'm going to mention, but Lydia Ko has always been a woman who's inspired me because I'm a golfer and she's a female golfer, and it's impressive what she's been able to do at only 23 years old currently. But when she was 17, she became the number one ranked professional golfer in the world out of all females, which is insane. Currently, her accolades stand at 20 professional wins, 15 on the LPGA Tour. She's a two-time major champion. She was Rookie of the Year in 2014, 2015 Player of the Year, and she won an ESPY. She is very accomplished, extremely young, and extremely talented. So I think it just goes to show, whatever sport you're in and whatever gender that you are, there's always going to be someone for you to look up to, and people at the top of the game that are just really cool and just doing really awesome things. And it's just cool to be able to acknowledge that and highlight it.
Yeah, for more athletes, that are super influential, we have Serena Williams, Simone Biles, Megan Rapinoe. All of these women are just so empowering just to watch them. Simone Biles at the Olympics was absolutely just amazing to watch. And I think it's so important to celebrate female athletes.
Yeah, and going off of that, I know Simone Biles, she's made it so far, and she's such an incredible gymnast and athlete that it's crazy to see. And also to kind of close out a bit, I think it's really cool to see, like William was mentioning, female figures from the past, and to see how not how few, but how difficult it was to really stand out and make a change back then, but to see how far we have come, just having even just a Women's History Month and everything, just to raise, not awareness, but just to respect all the females that have made a big change.
Yeah, and speaking of sports players and, former women athletes, Mia Hamm was somebody who played on the U.S. women's soccer team. She's scored more international goals than any other soccer player and led a generation of, a lot of girls to become passionate about sports. She coaches a lot of camps and stuff. So, that's good to see that she's still involved in teaching younger girls to be passionate and, play the game and be that they can be as good as they want to be, just because they aren't worse than anyone just because they're a girl.
Mm-hmm. Another field that women are doing amazing in that I've seen is chefs and Food Network and all of that. I know that cooking on television has been male dominated in the past, or chefs in kitchens. A lot of times you see men leading kitchens and stuff like that. So I think it's cool to see Alex Guarnaschelli, Giada, Nancy Silverton, all of them are super influential women in the kitchen and baking and with 5-star Michelin restaurants. And I think it's really cool to see these women leading businesses that have a ton of clients from everywhere around the world, or customers from around the world.
All the women that we have mentioned today in the podcast played a really important role getting us to where we are today with women's history as a whole. And to go into a little bit more depth about Women's History Month, it began in 1908 in New York City when thousands of women united and marched just to get better labor laws, conditions, and the rights to vote, which is crazy to think that that's what they were working for in 1908. But a year later, on February 28th, members of a socialist party, suffragists and socialists, gathered in Manhattan for what they called the First International Women's Day. And the idea caught on and made its way to Europe. And in March of 1910, they all agreed on International Women's Day, was then formally honored on March 8th, 1911, and it has been ever since. So that was really cool just to see what they were fighting for back then versus what we are fighting for today.
And that concludes this week's episode. It is so important to celebrate influential women and to inspire young girls to grow up and do big things for the world. In order to stay updated with all things Myers Park, it is important to follow at Myers Park High School and at MPHS_SGA on Instagram. Also, sign up for the Mustang Express email chain to receive important information about Myers Park. You can subscribe on the MPHS PTSO website. If you have any questions you would like to add to the podcast, you can DM either Instagram account. We will be back later with another MPHS Student Government podcast episode. We look forward to having you. Bye!